Hi, this is Taylor Garcia for EDL 856, School Community Relations, and this is the case study, Parental Apathy. We are going to dive right into Category 1, which is Problem Identification and Analysis. So we're going to start with what do I know? There's three things that I really highlighted for things that I know. One is there's not much communication from the principal with the community or parents. He states in the case study that he feels that they just want to be left alone and they don't want to be bothered. Number two is that there's currently not a PTO or PTA at John F. Kennedy School. However, I do know that there was one in the past that they referenced. And I also know that after deciding to have this parent meeting, the invitation was shared with students, and then the students were supposed to pass along the meeting to their parents. Next, we're going to move into what do I need to know. So one thing I need to know is, how are parents normally communicated with? Is it this student messenger system? Is it phone calls, emails, social media, school website? How are they normally communicated with this? So is the student messenger system the norm for them? Another thing I need to know is, what was the driving factor for those 8 parents who showed up? They've obviously showed up for a reason, whether that be to volunteer or whether that be to voice their opinion or concern that they may be having. And then the last thing that I need to know is, how many parents are there that are a part of the school? The principal mentions that the 8 parents that showed up is not an accurate representation, so I want to know how many parents there are in the school and what would be an accurate representation to him that he would be satisfied with. Lastly, we're going to move into identifying the problem. So one, I think that the principal of the school doesn't think that there needs to be communication with members of the community and parents. I think that is a problem. Another issue is that Mrs. Rose is wanting to change this low parent involvement by having a meeting with parents to ask how and if they're even wanting to be involved within the school. And then 3, I think that even after the parents showing up to that first meeting and the principal not wanting to proceed because he felt the turnout was poor and it wasn't, again, that accurate representation of parent population, I think that that's an issue with them moving forward to increase parent involvement. Moving into Category 2 now is my proposed plan of action. So step 1 would be to continue on with that original parent meeting and those 8 parents that showed up. By continue, I think you're showing them that you value their time, you value their opinion, you respect them for being there to get involved. And also, while you're there, brainstorm with those parents that actually showed up. What ways would they like to volunteer and get involved? When and where should the next meeting be? And what times and days and locations are going to work best for parents within that community so that they can show up and volunteer or share their thoughts and opinions. The next step is going to be, again, like I said, have another parent meeting, get feedback from other parents, and when you do that, you really need to be sure that you're really communicating when that meeting is, rather than just using the student messenger system. Maybe use social media, a school website, email, phone call, signs within the school, signs outside of the school, like the marquee sign that some schools may have if they have that. I think just posting it everywhere so that parents know that they are welcomed and they are valued to be there. And then step 3 would be to, for Mrs. Rose, for her to create a schedule for her to meet with her building principal regularly, be able to communicate about the use of parent involvement. This is going to allow 3 important things. 1, I think it's going to allow the principal to share what his expectations are, what he does want, what he does not want with Mrs. Rose. It's going to be a place for Mrs. Rose to share her thoughts and concerns and changes that she's wanting to see. And also, this is going to allow them to disagree. They probably wouldn't want to disagree in front of a big meeting of parents. So if they meet beforehand, and if they have a disagreement, they can work through that issue, and then they can present as a strong, united leadership team who is on the same page. I think that that's really going to benefit them as leaders, and I also think it's going to benefit any meetings with parents that would be happening in the future. We are going to be moving into Category 3 now, which is to resolve these issues based on promoting the success of all students. So this big overarching question is, what is best for students? One, I think generating positive public character of the school is going to be very important. This direct quote from the case study says, "It appeared that her new school had a very limited program with little contact or involvement with the parents and the larger community." So this really shows that there isn't any involvement or any communication with parents or community members. And without this communication or involvement, people aren't going to have a well-rounded view of the school, or the view that they may have is probably a negative one because they don't know what's going on in the school, so they can't really have an opinion one way or another that's probably accurate. So by allowing them to come in and get involved is really going to build that positive public character. The next thing that I think is going to be best for students is working to shift the mindset of the building principal to be inclusive of everyone. Obviously, this is going to kind of be put back onto him, and Mrs. Rose can be working with him. Another direct quote from the case study says, "He had informed her that he had felt differently when he had first become an administrator, but had encountered a lot of parent apathy." So this kind of shows me that maybe he's feeling a little defeated by his past experiences. And if he's not thinking in this positive mindset that he needs to have as a leader, that the school needs him to have, that any of these changes that Mrs. Rose is trying to make happen are probably not going to happen, and she's wanting them to happen to better the students and better the school. And lastly, what I think is going to be best for students is for Mrs. Rose. She's really going to have to advocate for parents and community members to be involved. Another quote from the case study says, "His sense of the community was that people didn't want to be involved and they expected the educators to do all of the work." So in the case study, he really mentions his sense of the community pulse, which means what is he feeling, but it doesn't mean what he's being explicitly told by parents or community members. So I think if Mrs. Rose can just continue to encourage the principal to communicate with those community members and parents, and allowing them to come into the building, that is really going to be best for the students that are within that building. Moving on to category 4, this is debriefing of the problem. So we're going to start with what I am thinking. So these are just some thoughts that I had throughout working and reading through this case study. The first thing I'm thinking is that the principal had made a very weak effort when communicating that first parent meeting, making an announcement and expecting students to not only remember their homework or what happened throughout the day, but also they need to remember to tell their parents about this meeting. I don't think that is reasonable or reliable for communicating with parents. I also think that it seems like the principal's really feeling defeated, like I've already said, from his past experiences. He mentioned that he had felt very different when he started as an administrator, and it seems like that sour taste is kind of still in his mouth a little bit. And number 3, the last thing that I'm thinking is that positive change could really happen if Mrs. Rose is consistent in her efforts. The first time she brought up this low parent involvement, she kind of got brushed to the side and was feeling really discouraged. The next time she brought it up, he was a little bit more open and agreed to have this parent meeting. So I think if she stays consistent and just kind of shows her principal that I'm not going to let this go because I feel like this is important for our school and for our students, that this positive change could really happen. Next, we're going to move into what I am feeling. I feel a little disappointed in the principal's attitude. He seems to be pretty blind to the fact that there is clearly an issue that needs to be addressed about communicating with parents and community members. I'm also feeling kind of frustrated that he wasn't supportive of his assistant principal, because she's doing this out of a place of love for her school and her job and the students, and I think she's wanting to make positive change, and he's just kind of shut her down. And lastly, I feel concerned that the principal is really making those assumptions, saying that he can sense the pulse of the community without really talking to community members. So he's just making assumptions on his own and saying, this is how the community feels and everything is fine and you just need to trust me. Lastly, we're going to move into what I'm valuing first. I really value Mrs. Rose's efforts to make changes that she feels clearly passionately about to improve the school and improve it for the students and for the parents and for the community. I also value the principal's attitude and feelings, although it is kind of a negative attitude, and he seems to have some negative feelings. I do value his feelings, and I think that over time, if you could really figure out why he's maybe acting in a negative manner, then it might, if he can start to kind of come to terms with that, then he can start really opening up his mind to some of these changes that could be made. And lastly, I really value those 8 parents that showed up to that first meeting. The fact that they would take their own time out of their, I'm sure, busy lives, busy schedules to come discuss ways to be involved, and that really just shows their commitment to making positive change for the school, for their children. Next, we're going to move into some unresolved issues, or maybe issues that would be open to some further investigation. One unresolved issue is the building principal had already stated that he is not going to support a PTO or a PTA. So if that's what the parents want, he's either going to have to allow them to have a PTO or a PTA, or he needs to come up with an alternative solution to keep those parents that are willing to be involved and help and better the school. He needs to be able to keep them happy. One thing that I would like to further investigate was how long was there a PTO or a PTA active at the school? Was it under a different building principal, or was it under this building principal and then it just kind of fizzled out? I really want to know how long ago that was, and then also why did the PTO stop meeting and stop being active within the school? Another topic that I would like to investigate is how the principal normally communicates. Is it normally the student messengers, or is he only doing that because he maybe doesn't feel as strongly or feel like this parent meeting is really that important? Or does he normally use phone calls or emails or the school website or social media? I want to know how he really communicates as the building leader. And the last thing that I would want to investigate is, do parents really feel like there's a lack of communication? I know that he talks about how they want to be left alone, but this is all his feeling. I want to know what the parents are feeling, and do they feel satisfied with the communication and not being involved in the school, or are they unhappy and they want to see changes as well? Lastly, we're going to be moving into category 5, which is a time for me to kind of reflect on standard 7, which is, as the educational leader, promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by promoting communities of engagement for families and other stakeholders in the school community. So for component 1 and promoting academic success of every student, one way I was able to do this was in category 3 when I mentioned ensuring that the school has a positive public image. With a positive public image, it's going to encourage community stakeholders to donate to the school, or maybe share resources that they have that are going to help students grow academically. And then another way that I was able to promote academic success was talking about continuing on with that original parent meeting and those 8 parents that did show up. This allows them to voice their opinions and thoughts, and it ensures that if they're involved in the school, then they're involved in their child's education and allowing their child to be successful. Component 2 was talking about promoting personal well-being of every student. One way I was able to do this was by talking about that shift in mindset in the building principal, allowing him to be inclusive of families and community members and being open to communicating. I think if he has a more positive outlook, it's just going to be spread through the administration, down to the teachers, down to the students. It's just going to really promote that positive well-being that we're looking for. Another way that I was able to promote this was for Mrs. Rose and the principal to have regular meetings. I think if the 2 building leaders are in communication and they're on the same page and they have the same mindset, that this is really going to benefit the building as a whole. And then for component 3, it was about promoting communities of engagement for families and other stakeholders. One way I was able to do this was for Mrs. Rose to continue to be that advocate for parents and community members with her building principal. And then I was also able to do that by planning another parent meeting to get feedback from more parents, and this is going to allow the community members and families to all come together and communicate their concerns or their needs or ways that they could be involved in volunteering and giving back to the school. So this has been my case study for EDL 856, Parental Apathy. Thank you for watching.